Welcome everyone to the Cape Kendall Lecture Series. I'm Ron Hoy, representing the Cape Lecture Committee, and it's my pleasure to introduce the introducer, who happens to be, and the reason for this is because the person who's going to be the introduction is Melissa Rookledge, who is the program coordinator and is the main figure behind this lecture series. But she wears two hats, because not only does she work in the dean's office at Cornell, dean of faculty office at Cornell, she also is on the music faculty at Ithaca College. So it's special, and so it's only appropriate that she should introduce her Ithaca College colleague. So Melissa, besides being our program coordinator, has also been involved in music education in Ithaca for as long as she's been here. And she's been involved with the Opus School of Music here in town. And before that, she is a choral director of the Odyssey Choir at Cornell. And before she came to Ithaca, she was very much involved in the music scene in Connecticut, as well as Yale College. And so we thought it would be a great opportunity for you to be introduced to the person who's behind the scenes of this whole show. So Melissa, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. In addition to my position as the program coordinator for the Cornell Academics and Professors Emeriti organization, as Ron said, I am also choir director and worked with Dr. Baruch Whitehead as a colleague last semester at Ithaca College, where I was a visiting professor serving as a sabbatical replacement. I conducted the treble chorale at Ithaca College last fall, and I am also the founding artistic director of the Odyssey Choir at the Opus Ithaca School of Music. The Odyssey Choir has over 100 singers and 4 ensembles, youth through adults. And Dr. Whitehead and I share singers that sing in both of our choral ensembles in the community. I am pleased to call him a wonderful colleague in the music field and share some highlights of his experience today. Dr. Baruch J. Whitehead is a professor of music education at Ithaca College and the founding director of the Dorothy Cotton Jubilee Singers, an ensemble dedicated to the preservation of the Negro spiritual and its profound legacy in American history. Since 2010, Dr. Whitehead has led the Dorothy Cotton Singers in performances that celebrate African-American sacred music as a powerful tool for promoting social justice and racial healing. The chorus has performed at prestigious venues, including the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. on Mother's Day in 2017, and made its Carnegie Hall debut under his direction in March 2022, along with the renowned Fisk Jubilee Singers. Dr. Whitehead also founded the Orff Schulberg certification program at Ithaca College and Marshall University, a music education approach that views music as an essential natural system akin to language. He currently directs the annual Orff certification training course at Boston University, sharing his expertise in dynamic student-centered music pedagogy. His areas of expertise include diversity in music education, gospel music and its preservation within mainstream musical settings, music of the African diaspora, music of the civil rights movement. As a sought-after speaker and workshop presenter, Dr. Whitehead has contributed to numerous state, national, and international conferences, including in the United States, Spain, Brazil, and Finland. He has directed ensembles such as the Unshackled Gospel Choir in Syracuse, the SUNY Cortland Gospel Choir, and the Voices Multicultural Chorus, and has served as a clinician, conductor, and adjudicator in the US and abroad, including in Belgium, Brazil, and Central New York. With a background in both marching band and concert band, he has 15 years of experience in these areas as well. Dr. Whitehead is also an active peace activist. He presented a peace concert with its renowned Israeli composer and performer Yair Dalal, featuring youth from Muslim and Jewish communities. His original work, the Peace Cantata, premiered at Ithaca College's celebration during the 2006 Martin Luther King Jr. service for the Ithaca City School District. He is the author of several academic papers, including a chapter on the music of the civil rights movement in Music and Conflict Transformation, Harmonies and Dissonances in Geopolitics, 2008. His lecture, Hidden Gems, Coded Messages in the Negro Spirituals, delves into the history and enduring relevance of music created by enslaved Africans in America, exploring how these spirituals served as coded messages of hope, resistance, and liberation, which you will hear today. He has received numerous awards and recognition and received his PhD at Capella University, his MFA at University of Florida, and BA and BME at the University of Cincinnati. Dr. Whitehead's work continues to inspire communities, students, and educators, championing the transformative power of music as a force for cultural connection, education, and social change. We look forward to his presentation today, and I will now turn it over to Dr. Whitehead. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Okay, I need to update my CV there. I thought, wow, I have a career spanning over about 35 years, so some of you know how that feels. I'm looking forward to retirement. My body tells me I should do it, but my spirit tells me I have a couple more years in me, so who knows? So I'm glad to be here and to share on the topic of the Negro spirituals. And I'm gonna start off with 3 abolitionists who you may not be familiar with, but without these brave souls to write down and preserve these spirituals, a lot of these songs we would not know today. So let's just get started. This first gentleman is William Francis Allen. And I can't, it's so small, I can't read it up here, but you can read it. He was a American classical scholar and music historian, pioneer in the documentations of African-American spirituals, key figure in the American ethnomusicology. Major contributions: the editor of the Slave Songs of the United States in 1867. Now, this was the first known book of the Negro spirituals that was published back in the late 1800s. He first published collections of African-American spirituals. He co-edited with Charles Picard Ware and Lucy McKim Garrison. This book contains over 130 songs gathered from formerly enslaved people. The songs transcribed primarily from the Sea Islands of South Carolina and Georgia during the Civil War, preserved the oral traditions and cultural legacy of African Americans, provided firsthand insight into the lives of experience of the enslaved people. Academic work: he was a professor of ancient languages at the University of Wisconsin, advocated for the scholarly and cultural value of Negro spirituals, blended classical scholarship with a commitment to social justice and preservation. And his legacy influenced future work in African-American music studies and folklore. Slave songs remain a foundational text in musicology in American history, celebrating for helping preserve a crucial part of American cultural heritage. So this was the first one, William Francis Allen. The next person I'm going to talk to you about is Charles Picard Ware. And he was an American educator, abolitionist, music transcriber who played a key role in preserving African-American spirituals. He worked in collecting songs, the slave songs, during the Civil War. He worked as a superintendent of the freedmen in South Carolina Sea Islands. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. A region where many enslaved people have been freed due to the Union occupation. While working with formerly enslaved people, he observed their musical traditions and began transcribing their songs. Early emancipation effort after the Union forces captured the Sea Islands in 1861, thousands of enslaved Africans American were freed and declared contrabands of war. The Port Royal experiment in 1862, a groundbreaking reconstruction effort in the Sea Islands of South Carolina, where formerly enslaved people worked abandoned plantations for wages, received education from Northern missionaries, and began building self-sufficient communities as early tests of Black freedom and self-governance. So what happened when the Union came in, they captured the island on Port Royal. And there were about 10,000 enslaved people that was, all of a sudden they were freed, because all of the wealthy slave owners left. They got out of town. During the Port Royal experience in South Carolina, started in 1868, enslaved people in the Sea Islands and surrounding coastal areas experienced one of the first major tests of emancipation in the United States, where here is what happened to them. Liberation. When the Union forces captured the Sea Islands, including Port Royal, white plantation owners fled, leaving behind around 10,000 enslaved people who were effectively free. And then they formed communities. They pushed for land ownership and the resistance to re-enslavement. Initially, some free people were allowed to purchase or work plots of land. Many believed they would receive land permanently, 40 acres and a mule. We all know what happened to that. But after the war, most of the land was returned to former Confederate owners, reversing those gains. So they got the land, and then it was given back to the people that were oppressing them and the Confederates. So go figure. The legacy, the Port Royal experience became a model for later Reconstruction policies and shows the formerly enslaved people could strive with freedom, education, and opportunity, despite the many challenges they continue to face. So once they were freed, this became kind of a model for Reconstruction. And we know that in South Carolina in particular, there were like Black senators. They had the largest amount of enslaved, not enslaved people, but freed people in the legislators. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Lucy McGarrison in a minute. Ware acknowledged the difficulties of notating spirituals using conventional Western music notation. So even when I go to Africa and try to transcribe some of the rhythms that I hear or some of the songs that I hear, it's very hard to put it in Western notation because you can't really capture the nuances that occur in these songs. So they found it very early on that the notation, putting it through Western European eyes, was really something that was difficult. He paid special attention to call and response singing, syncopation, and improvisational elements, which were central to the tradition. So a lot of the songs, call and response, if I say something like, it was like, Funguna Lafia would be the call. If the response would be, Ashe, Ashe, Funguna Lafia, Ashe, Ashe, a little chant from Nigeria there. So call and response is really very, very important to the African music in particular. So when the enslaved people were brought here, they brought that culture too. His work helped bring wider recognition to spirituals as a distinct and valuable form of American folk music rather than merely adaptations of European hymns. But, you know, they also, later on, when people like the Fifth Jubilee singers started singing the spirituals, I'm gonna talk a little bit about them at the end of the presentation, they went into four-part harmony, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. But basically the spirituals were just single melodies that people would sing. After the Civil War, he continued advocating for African-American education and rights. His contribution to slave songs of the United States remained crucial in the study of African-American music, ethnomusicology, and cultural history. Here is Lucy McKim Garrison, musicologist, abolitionist, and one of the co-authors, editors of Slave Songs of the United States in 1861, the first published connection of African-American spirituals. She was among the first to systematically transcribe and notate African-American spirituals, capturing their unique melodies, rhythms, and performing styles. Recognize the distinct musical elements of these songs, such as syncopation, call and response, and pentatonic scales. Pentatonic scales are 5 notes, you know, do, re, mi, sol, la. So I have to think about that. Do, re, mi, sol, la, sol, mi, re, do. And all of those songs, all of the spiritual can be played on the black keys of the piano. So kind of think about that. Which were often dismissed and misrepresented by musicians at the time. She was a young white music teacher, abolitionist from Philadelphia, traveled to the Sea Islands to South Carolina in 1862 as part of the Port Royal experiments to educate newly freed people. While there, she became deeply moved by the spirituals sung by the formerly enslaved communities. She began notating these songs, often directly from the singing voices of freed people, making one of the first times African-American spirituals were written down using Western notation. And she also ran into the problem or trying to notate exactly what she heard from the freed people, I should say. So it was very, very difficult. Even you know the opera Porgy and Bess by George Gershwin, I'm sure, right? Shake your head if you do, yeah. Gershwin actually went to the Sea Islands. He spent a couple of weeks there, and he wrote down what he heard. And it was, if you know anything about that opera, it's really amazing. And I thought to myself, he could only write this if he heard it from the people that he was staying with. So. Later, she married Wendell Garrison, the literary editor of The Nation. Due to health issues, she had to reduce her professional work and passed away at the young age of 35. Her work paved the way for the academic and cultural appreciation of spirituals as a distinct and vital American art form. Through her transcriptions, may not have fully captured the nuance and improvisation of live performances, her respectful effort to preserve the music of enslaved people set a precedent for future ethnomusicologists. So why do I start my presentation with those abolitionists? I often people often ask me, you know, should white people sing spirituals? You know, if you've ever heard, ever seen a Dorothy Cotton Jubilee sing, you know, we mainly white singers. But I often have to go back to these 3 people. Without these 3 white abolitionists, we would not have these spirituals. So I wanted to make that connection. So when people come up and say, oh, you can't sing that because you're not Black or you don't have that experience, that's just it's not true. These songs are written down and preserved for humankind and not a particular race of people. All right, so let's move to the coded songs. The spirituals as secret communication, enslaved people embedded messages of escape, resistance, and hope in songs. Songs received as tools for survival, community, and rebellion. Hidden meanings were often invisible to slaveholders. So there's a short little video I want to share with you now.
The words we're saying have a double meaning. So anytime you hear anything about traveling shoes or chariots or wheels, somebody's getting ready to run. And so you take a Negro spiritual, swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. That chariot is movement. That chariot is swinging low, picking you up, putting you on that Underground Railroad, taking you somewhere to freedom. So when we sing those songs, it's like, something's getting ready to happen. So I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Jordan, that was metaphor for the Ohio River. A band of angels coming after me. Those conductors coming to help you, coming forth to carry me home. So they had all kind of little messages. The slave master would hear us singing and say, oh, they sound pretty happy tonight. Next day, 2 or 3 people gone, because we put that message out. We talked about wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade. Wade in the water, 'cause God's gonna trouble the waters. We stepped in that water, 'cause the dogs can't pick up your sin. We had all these songs that said it's time to move, it's time to go by the waterway, it's time to follow the North Star, it's time to start looking, it's time to start traveling, it's time to start getting ready to cross over that Jordan. Still away to Jesus. Oh, Lord, they're going on to heaven. No. Still away home. I ain't got long to stay. So we're still away to Jesus. We're still away to freedom. But it sounds like we're just talking about a life in the hereafter, but we're talking about a life in the here and now. The words were.
So as she pointed out, these spirituals had hidden meanings for the enslaved people that were hearing these spirituals. And we know that Harriet Tubman, who has some history right here in Ithaca, she was taught Sunday school at the AME Church over by South Side on Cleveland Avenue. But consider Moses, the song "Go Down Moses," way down in Egypt land, tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. So perhaps when the slaves heard that, they thought, oh, well, Harriet's coming. We have to ready ourselves for this. So these kinds of things are happening. Another famous spiritual is called "Follow the Drinking Gourd." Simple song about following a path in nature. Hidden code, the drinking gourd, the Big Dipper constellations pointing to the North Star. Oftentimes people will talk about the North Star, something that's going to guide you metaphorically, spiritually, but that North Star was a way that the slaves knew if they followed that Big Dipper, they would eventually end up in freedom. So let's just listen to a little history of the drinking gourd.
What if I told you a song once guided slaves to freedom? In the next few seconds, you'll discover the secret behind "Follow the Drinking Gourd." This song was actually a coded map. Drinking gourd referred to the Big Dipper constellation. Slaves used it to find the North Star and freedom. Verses described the path they needed to take. Crossing rivers, climbing mountains, they traveled this secret route to escape. A man named Peg Leg Joe taught them the song. He marked trees along the route to signal safe passages. For many, this song was literal a lifesaver. It represents courage, ingenuity, and hope. Next time you look at the night sky, remember this hidden map. Can you imagine relying on a song for survival, like what you see? Subscribe for more incredible stories. What if I told you?
I thought that was really a wonderful way of putting that. Wade in the water, you know. A biblical reference to healing and baptism. The hidden code advised escapees to enter water to throw off bloodhound's scent. Symbol of protection and deliverance during escape, often used just before or during an escape attempt. So let's listen to another example, and I may not play the whole thing, so I'm mindful of the time.
A spiritual allowed the slaves to secretly communicate routes on the Underground Railroad. And most of all, a spiritual connects you to the power that created us all. Anybody want to talk about that? Can I get an amen? Sounds like an American story to me. This next one has a lot of secret codes, dual meanings in the words. We'll talk about it after. See if you can get it. See that thing? Oh, God told you it was like God told you that thing. Oh, God told you.
I think you get the point, right? Why it matters. These songs show the creativity, resilience, and resistance of enslaved people. Music was used as a form of covert action under oppression. Spirituals carry faith, history, and rebellion in every note. And it's interesting to me that none of the spirituals that I've ever discovered talk about retribution. No. And you know, retribution is really kind of popular now in some corners of the US. But they never talked about. Unlike South African, their freedom songs, and because they were in different languages that the white Afrikaners did not understand, and they were some of the lyrics in those songs that the South African song, they were pretty violent. But in this country, I have not found any songs that talk about retribution. The power of the Negro spiritual. Spiritual are more than songs. They are a record of faith under fire, cultural resistance, communal survival. Negro spirituals often fall into three thematic categories. And these are the ones I just arbitrarily chosen. There could be many, many more. But let's talk about the virtuous living, salvation, and heaven. Bucket number one, living righteously in the face of oppression. Emphasize personal morality, community values, and endurance. Encourage enslaved people to walk in dignity and to walk in dignity even under unjust systems. And I think also this also became a blueprint, if you will, or template for the civil rights movement, because we know that during the civil rights movement, a lot of these songs were just repurposed. They took the same melodies and the same tunes and just changed the lyrics to go along with what was happening during the civil rights movement. And Dorothy Cotton, I don't know, rest her soul, she was one person that really used music to bring people together. And we often had many conversations about her experience singing these songs. I said, oh, that sounds like, this spiritual that my grandmother used to sing. She go, oh yeah, we just changed the words to make it like what was happening with what was going on today. So during the civil rights movement, I should say. Persevere through trials, be faithful and work in spirit, treat others with compassion and integrity. Example of virtuous living, keep your hand on the plow, hold on, stay the course, stay grounded in righteousness. I'm gonna live so God can use me. Every action should honor God. Let us break bread together, community, humility, fellowship, and faith. Historical context, songs of virtuous living help maintain inner freedom, even when outer freedom was denied. So I think it became very cathartic for the enslaved people to be able to think, I may not have freedom here, but in another place I will. In another place I will be freed. So I think it gave them hope, because if you don't have hope, you don't have anything. And I think that was the main theme that I found in the Negro spirituals, just gave people hope and gave people an opportunity to speak what was in their souls. Like this song, Lord, how come me here, in that broken English. How come me here? I wish I had never been born. This mother whose child was torn from her and sold into slavery, speaking to God about why me? All right, so bucket number 2, salvation, deliverance from sin, suffering, and slavery. These songs often drew from the Old Testament stories of liberation, Moses and Exodus, link spiritual salvation with earthly freedom. God delivers the faithful. Oppression is not the end of the story. A great justice is coming. So, and I also should say too, the slaves were not permitted to learn how to read and write. So a lot of the ways that they got these biblical stories into their psyche, if you will, was through songs. Like, Did My Lord, what's that little song? Little David, play on your harp, hallelujah, hallelujah. Little David, play on your harp, hallelujah. David was a shepherd boy. He killed Goliath and he shouted for joy. So that story of David and Goliath through a song, they could know those songs. So that was just really interesting, I think. And a great justice is coming. I'm gonna pause here because the Dorothy Cotton Jubilee Singers, we do have a concert on Sunday. You'll hear some of these songs Sunday at 4:00 at Ford Hall. So I hope to see many of you there. Great day, the righteous marching. So these songs were cathartic. And it also teaches us today that we can, it speaks to our humanity. And if you're open, it will speak to your humanity. And you can gain something from these songs as you listen and to study and to hear about these songs. Go Down Moses, we talked about Pharaoh's Egypt and slavery in the American South. Did my Lord deliver Daniel? If God could deliver those Hebrew boys out of the belly of the whale and out of the fiery furnace, surely he could deliver me from slavery. Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, she talked about, coming under the Underground Railroad. Both spiritual and physical liberation are often called coded messages of escape. The third bucket I want to talk about today is the bucket of heaven, a promised land beyond suffering. And this gave them hope. This gave them hope. There's this one spirit that we're gonna do on Sunday. It's called Just Tell Jesus. Just tell Jesus all of your troubles. And it wasn't lost on me as I was preparing that song last night in rehearsal that my ancestors sing this song. But today, particularly for the young people, they don't have any of this history in order to focus their attention through what these songs are about. You know, like, oh, I just want to sing some songs and it sounds cool and I like the spirituals and I like gospel music, so I'll be in this choir. But it goes, I want them to go beyond that who sang these songs? Why did they sing these songs? What did they get out of these songs? And why should we honor our ancestors through these songs today? And sometimes that's a hard one to sell, because when you grow up in a time where you can basically go where you want to go, marry who you want to marry, and we don't know how long that's going to last in our present situation, but but it's hard for young people to really kind of grasp the what we're talking about because of life experiences. I think people in this room have many experiences. I was talking to my friend over here who's talking to me about going overseas and how the spirituals were embraced by the Europeans. So those kinds of things I think are so important to really ground ourselves in. So it's just not, oh yeah, we try to perfect what we do, but it's not all about the notes. It's about what is behind the songs that I am really trying to impart on my choirs. Examples of this idea of heaven: I got a robe, you got a robe, all God's children got a robe. When I get to heaven, I'm going to put on my robe. I'm going to shout all over God's heaven, and no one can put me out. In that great getting up morning, fare thee well, fare thee well. I'm going to get up. I'm going to get up. It's going to be a triumphant a resurrection there. My Lord, what a morning when the stars begin to fall. I can hear the trumpet sound, kind of conjuring up the ends of days, if you will. In the Christian tradition, we believe that, God would come back and make everything right. But my Lord, what a morning really kind of talks about that. A belief in heaven often, it gave them hope. It gave them a reason to get up and to endure those horrible conditions that they found themselves in with no fault of their own. Can you imagine going to another continent, kidnapping people, bringing them here and making them work for nothing, and then treat them like they were animals? So the history of the Black man in America is long and tough and hard. But these songs, I think, from my ancestors are ones that can really give us hope, because I know I am the hope of the slave. I became the first full professor, African-American male, in the history of Ithaca College, and I don't say that to get an applause, but thank you anyways. But why did it take 112 years? What's going on? So, but I know that, and people, I could have done it a lot sooner, but I thought, I'm just getting ready to retire. Why even fool with all of that paperwork? But then I thought about the people who came before me who were not able to even go to that school. And perhaps my accomplishment will inspire somebody else, the next Baruch Whitehead that comes behind me. So those kinds of things are happening. Why these themes still matter: speak to the resilience of the human spirit, connect faith, justice, and culture, continue to inspire the civil rights movement, gospel tradition, and choral music worldwide. So, and I can never attend a choral concert without there's a spiritual or gospel song. So one of the things that I've been working on in my professional career is like, when I go to these conferences and I see these wonderful choirs and I see very few Black faces in it. And I ask the question, why is that? Can our children not sing? They sing very well, but they don't have the opportunity. They don't have the money to travel to where these groups are stationed, and you know, you get pay a fee, stay in a hotel. I mean, that takes money. So so out of that concern, I started Ithaca College Gospel Festival back in 2005, and we used to have it annually, but now, you know, I'm tired. It takes a lot of effort. So I don't know, maybe I have one more in me, but you know, we brought these kids in, we paid for the buses, we paid for the hotels, and we said, come in, we're gonna give you an opportunity to have the same experience that your white counterparts have had for years and years and years and years and years. So that, and we're gonna celebrate gospel music on a very high level, and we brought together with the symphony orchestra, and it was just really a wonderful time. So I mentioned at the beginning of my talk about the Fifth Jubilee Singers. You may not know this man, but he was the first director of the Fifth Jubilee Singers, George White, a white teacher, missionary, and the treasurer of the Fisk University. He became the first director of the Fifth Jubilee Singers. He organized and led the group on national and international tours starting in 1871 to raise funds for the school, helping to bring Negro spirituals to the concert stage and gain wider respect for African American music. So here again, there's this white connection, if you will, that Alan Shepard is another person, ex-slave, who really worked with Mr. White with his Fifth Jubilee Singers. But they really kind of popularized the Negro spirituals, because they would go on these tours, particularly in Europe and places like that, and they would do classical repertoire. But when they started singing the spirituals, people kind of stood up. Well, sing that again. We want to hear more of that. And I don't know if this story is true or not, but Radio City Music Hall, I think they had a rotating stage where you would sing and it would kind of go, and you if you weren't finished, you weren't finished. But when the Fifth singers sang, they had to bring them back because the crowd just went crazy. And recently I heard, I just saw a documentary on Marian Anderson, which was, if you have not seen that documentary, you really should, PBS. And she was talking about her whole life story is just so amazing. But she was talking about when she was in Europe singing, and she was doing the classical repertoire. And I think she was in Russia of all places. And they start banging on the stage, saying Deep River, Deep River, Deep River. They wanted to hear those spirituals. So I thought that was really, really kind of, there's something about these songs that are really kind of attract people, is what I'm trying to get at. Well, like I said, he transcribed a lot of these songs from the members of his group. What we got here? So this is how, maybe without the piano, if you can think about, did my Lord deliver Daniel? This is just a solo. This is the notes that they wrote down. And I'll give you a little bit of this. Now we're gonna run out of time here.
My Lord delivered Daniel, and why not every man? He delivered Daniel from the lion's den, children from the belly of the whale, and the Hebrew children from the fiery furnace. Why not every man did my Lord? So that you hear the solo voice, like, just one line of notes. And then you had composers, probably the best arranger of the Negro spirituals is Moses Hogan, who died
very untimely, I would say. He was like in his 50s, incredible person, but he left us a body of work. His spirituals are not easy, but I wanted to show you and let you hear how composers then took these single melodies and wrote them for SATB. Let me see here. There we go.
Did my Lord deliver Daniel, then why not every man? Did my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, did my Lord deliver Daniel, then why not every man? Did my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, did my Lord deliver Daniel, then why not every man? He delivered Daniel from the lion's den, Jonah from the belly of the whale, and the Hebrew children from the fiery furnace, and why not every man? Did my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver why not every man? The wind blows east and the wind blows west, it blows like the judgment day, and every poor soul that never did pray will be glad to pray that day. Did my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver why not every man? I set my foot on the gospel ship, and the ship it began to sail. It landed me over on Canaan shore, and I'll never come back anymore. Did my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, did my Lord deliver Daniel, why not every man? Did my Lord deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, deliver Daniel, did my Lord deliver Daniel from the lion's den, from the belly of the whale, and the Hebrew children from the fiery furnace? On every man, yes he did, deliver Daniel from the, oh yes, oh tell me. On every man, yes he did, deliver Daniel from the, oh yes he did.
And we're actually going to do that arrangement on Sunday. So pray that we can sound that good. I was telling the choir, that song's about 2 minutes, but it takes about 100 hours to perfect it. So good. So with that, I'm going to conclude my presentation, and I think we have time for some questions. Melissa, is that correct? But thank you again for having me. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation. I enjoyed putting it together. So thank you.
All right, if you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll come over.
Dr. Whitehead.
Dan.
I'm really struck by the fact that spirituals rarely mention Jesus. I mean, their focus seems to be on liberation. So the imagery is, Old Testament imagery from a Christian perspective. Is that the basic difference between spirituals and gospel music?
I'm not sure. I think there are a lot of spirituals that talk about Jesus. I want Jesus to walk with me. You know that when we're doing that. I think just tell Jesus. I mean, that's one. So I think here's the difference between the spiritual and gospel music. Spirituals are normally 4 parts: SATB, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, a cappella, dealing with biblical stories, virtuous living, heaven. What else I put? I can't remember the other bucket that I had. But yeah, but those kinds of things are happening, but gospel music, when gospel first started off, it was just really the treble voices, soprano, alto, and tenor, very tight harmony, no bass singers. So, and it also has a complement. It has the piano, the organ, bass guitar, and drums. So those are the biggest difference between gospel music and the spirituals. The spirituals are kind of the granddaddy, grandma, of all all of African American musical traditions. Even you could get into rap and things of that sort, because rap, the rhyming, the call and response nature, so those kinds of things. So yeah.
Any more questions? I hope this isn't offend you, but I've always been surprised that enslaved people adopted the religion of their enslavers.
What choice did they have?
Did they have any recollection of their original religions?
Yes, of course they did. But they were enslaved. They were forced to go into the white churches and sit in the balconies. But oftentimes, when they permitted the enslaved people to have a day off, like Sunday afternoons or Sunday evenings, they would go out into the camp, the forest, away from master's house, if you will, and have their own services. And they used to have these big buckets of water where they would just yell hallelujah, praise God. So it wouldn't carry, those sounds wouldn't carry back to the big house. And you may know Congo Square in New Orleans, where the slaves were permitted to come and celebrate their music and dance and things of that sort. So, but yeah, they really did not have a choice. Remember, the whole reason the African American Methodist Episcopal Church started was when Bishop Allen was praying in the white churches, and he was down in the congregation, he was in the balcony, and they picked him up and forcibly removed him from that church. And that's how that whole church began.
Hi, Baruch.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Joan.
I'm a little bit limited, but two observations. In your concerts for the Dorothy Cotton Jubilee Singers, you've been doing a wonderful job of introducing Black women writers, Black women composers to the whole, what would you call, it's not lexicon of
Repertoire.
yeah, the repertoire, thank you, of African American music. And today, you're making a pretty forceful point that the very people who first recorded and paid any attention to what we'll call African American music, gospel, were white women. And I think that's very interesting. And I wonder if you could tell us any more that you know about, if it sounds like they're all tied up with abolitionism.
Yes.
It sounds like they all went to the Sea Islands. That was a connection for education. I'm wondering, can we lay that then at the feet of, were they frankly Baptists? Were they Presbyterians? Who is the white, who are the white female groups who are, got their finger on the need to write down Black women's music?
I think Lucy Garrison was probably the most famous of the women who were abolitionists. Remember, back in the late 1800s, she was from Philadelphia. And it was the society, missionary, what, it was a society of missionary association that sent a lot of the abolitionists to South Carolina in that Port Royal experiment. So remember, the Union had just captured Port Royal, and all the white slave owners left for fear of their lives. So you had like 10,000 free people there. And then this missionary society got together, so we need to come in and educate these people and help them. We know
what missionary society?
I just know the name. I'm not sure what denomination they were associated with, but that may be another good way of looking that up. I have to ask Dr. Google when I get home.
We have time for one more question.
Are there any songs that originated in the sea islands of, down the coast? They have congregations and they get together. Is there anything that has been collected in their language, or?
You mean the Gullah people?
Hmm?
You mean the Gullah?
Yeah,
Yeah, there white people are preserving the Gullah language. Yeah, so
I've never heard one.
yeah, there's a society out there that's preserving that.
Because we lived on one of them and we never got anything but our kind of hymn.
Oh, okay.
So there's nothing recorded. huh?
Well, I think people are saying that these particular Gullah people that language is almost died out. And I know there's some efforts to preserve it. So, I mean, that's the extent that I know, but I know that the Gullah people, yeah. And also Gershwin, going back to Porgy and Bess, kind of was exposed to that language. And, that big aria, "My man's gone now," kind of goes into that language. And Dr. Jesus, and where he writes. And when I was growing up, and it was really amazing because I remember growing up in the South, and church would start and people start praying, and you have someone praying here, then another person would get up and start praying there, and another person. So it was just like it's in stereo. People are praying all over the sanctuary, and Gershwin heard that and he put it in his opera. So it's just like this improvisational piece of what he heard, which I thought was really amazing. And I remember being in Ghana at a funeral, and they started singing, and I thought, I heard this song growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in a different language, but the tune was the same. And it was like really incredible. And some people think that Amazing Grace, that wonderful hymn, Amazing Grace, maybe that song, that melody came from the belly of the ship that the slaves are crammed in. Wouldn't that be something? And then that Newton, he got religion, and he wrote Amazing Grace that saved a wretch like me. So yeah, these songs I think are great songs for us to study and to learn from and to embrace. Thank you again for being such a wonderful audience. I really appreciate it.